So you mentioned that you were in opposition to the Welsh government's new sexual education, if you will. And I believe you've called it global sex education. I believe it's a term you've used for it, because a lot of this then goes back to the, World Health Organization, United Nations, that are pushing, seems a lot of really suspect, to say the least, education, quote unquote, on children. So what kind of things did you notice that was going on specifically that initially caused you to raise alarm bells and initially caused you to all sort of realize that you had to come and oppose this? What sort of things were you noticing initially, or was everybody noticing?
Well, I'm a criminologist, so I specialise in child sex abuse. And back in 2013, I saw an article online claiming that Spain were teaching 4-year-olds about masturbation. So I wanted to look into this stuff to see if it was real. I was told that this was just propaganda. I went looking. I found documents from the World Health Organization that wanted children masturbating. So I was a little naive back then. This is the World Health Organization. They must be right. But I wanted the evidence for that. You have to have evidence. How are they coming up with these things? And that's when we discovered the work then of Dr. Alfred Kinsey, John Money, and so on. So I was already aware of this education before it even came to Wales. It was an article online, Wales Online, January 2020. The headline was, sex education from age 3 with no parental opt-out. My stomach just dropped. I went straight to the Welsh Government website, looked at their RSE code, and on page 4, they were referencing UNESCO. So UNESCO is United Nations, who are partnered with the World Health Organization. You don't need to take my word for this. When you open the UNESCO document, it tells you who they're partnered with. So I, again, naive, I thought that Kirsty Williams had made a mistake. You've made a mistake here now. I like everyone else, we're a devolved nation. Our education is for the Welsh children. This must be a mistake. And it wasn't long before I realized it was not a mistake. They knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. So I know there's a lot of uproar right now with this sex education for 3-year-olds in Wales. But what people need to realize is the whole of the UK adopted this in March 2017. The whole of the UK used the World Health Organization guidance for decision making. So that was politicians, health officials, education officials, and this education's been brought in with a view for legislative changes. And that's what you're seeing now, is a legislative change here in Wales. The lessons have already started rolling out across the UK. They're teaching 4-year-olds masturbation in England, in 2018. So we're all in the same storm. We're just in different boats. So it wasn't for us. It wasn't a case of what we've seen or what we witnessed. It was a preventative campaign for us. So it was always about prevention, stopping this come in. Now, as you know, 5 years on, we are now in a state of damage limitation. So it wasn't anything that I saw. It wasn't anything experienced. It was knowledge. If I didn't have that background knowledge, and I heard that they were bringing in a sex education which was safe for children, I'd be at the front campaigning for it. Because I understand the importance of sexual safeguarding. It's what I do. It's what I'm passionate about. All of my work is based on perpetrator narratives from the perpetrator perspective, So for me to be sat here campaigning against a sex education, that is something I never thought I would do. But obviously I've got to do it because I'm duty bound, because this is not an education. This is an agenda. And there is nothing healthy and hot about this.
So you said it's all bound up in queer theory and stuff like that. I believe you used the term queering of binaries and stuff like that. And I suppose we'll get into all of that in a little bit as well when we talk about Kinsey and Money in particular. Really, really sad stories, really, really evil stories with these gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't already gone and looked at stories like the Reimer twins, Alfred Kinsey with his book, The Sexual Behaviors or Sexual Behaviors
of the Human Male. Yeah.
Where I believe it's table 40 something or table 30 something.
I got the book there. This is chapter 5. So chapter 5 is the chapter on adolescent males, and the children within this chapter, the youngest child is 2 months old. So we do actually have that chapter in PDF on our website. If people want to access that, they don't have to go to the book. But the story with this book is Alfred Kinsey claimed to have studied the male population of America for homosexuality. He did not research the population of America. It was pedophiles and rapists. And, you know, there's a documentary out there now, Secret History, Kinsey's Pedophiles, where the people who work with Alfred Kinsey are on that documentary, and they will tell you themselves what they did with the research, how they keep the research, and, you know, they think it's just a joke.
Truly, truly evil man. And John Money as well, which we'll get onto when we talk about gender ideology and stuff like that. But I just want to grab your attention to this at the moment, because this was something you shared. I believe this is something from one of your presentations here. Pardon the very poor printing quality, as my printer was running out of ink, and for some reason was taking ages to do it. Is this from like an official textbook, is it?
So that is the actual guidance, the World Health Organization guidance that was used, and this is a quote, in decision making. So that was the guidance they actually used in the UK, in all 4 countries, for them to adopt comprehensive sexuality education. That's why that guidance is really important. So from that point where they all adopted this, the academics in each country, I think it was Professor Donaldson for Scotland. He also did some work here in Wales as well. And Professor Emma Reynolds then took on this task of this sex education to pretend that it's for the UK. So that's where the rebranding came in from CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education, because that's what that is, down to RSE. So it's a rebrand, it is. But that what you have there in your hands, that is the actual guidance they use for decision making. Now, when you go to our academics reports, so Professor Emma Reynolds, for example, you will see that she's using the definition of sexuality from the World Health Organization. So it's all there, you know, it's all, there's no secret. They are referencing this stuff. And we've even got correspondence back and forth with Kirsty Williams, where she admits this is co-constructed by UNESCO. So that's the original guidance there. That's where it all started for me in 2013.
And Kirsty Williams is the ex-education minister.
Former education minister, yeah.
So just to give you an insight, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who might not be watching or just listening, whatever, the page I have in my hand at the moment, I've got several which we're going to be going over, because there's a lot of things in here which I think if you understood, if you don't already understand it, if you understood these were being taught to your kids, you might have a lot of problems. So when we're talking about sexuality,
Yeah, so as you said, Dr. John Money believed that gender was a social construct. There was two young boys, David Reimer and Bruce. Yeah, Bruce. So twin boys, they had circumcision when they were very small. One of them was botched, pretty much mutilated his genitalia. And they ended up in Dr. John Money's office. You know, they didn't plan to go there, but they were seeking help. They ended up there. John Money said to David's mother, "Don't worry, there's nothing to worry about. We can raise him as a girl. We'll change her name to Brenda, put her in dresses, force her to play with girls' toys." There was also sexual assaults here as well. So Dr. John Money used to have the two children in his office without the parents present, and he would force the children to perform sex acts on each other, where David, who was Brenda then, had to take on the role of the female. By the time David realised, he always knew he was different. I know he didn't like dolls. He didn't like dresses. You know, he wasn't into any of that. And he always knew he was different. But they did actually tell him the truth. And he wanted a detransition back. By this time, it was too late, because Dr. Money had published his research as an absolute success. Again, this is not a myth. If you just Google David Reimer interview, David Reimer told the world before he died. Him and his mother, they went on national TV, chat shows. They told the world the truth. So he didn't just take this torture and abuse to the grave. He told the world the truth, you know, and the world was not listening. And because the world didn't listen, now our children are faced with gender-bred men and gender unicorns in school. Again, this is totally unethical. It's based off the back of child abuse. The raw data is child abuse, child mutilation, child sexual abuse. This is what we're actually dealing with right here, right now. And you did just say about Kinsey being hailed a hero, and I just want to flip back to that slightly if we can.
Of course.
3 of us are RSE accredited teacher trainers, and I can tell you with certainty, they use Alfred Kinsey's scale to teach about sexuality to the RSE teachers, who then take it into the classrooms. So this stuff, even though people say, oh, it was back then, it was historic, this stuff is still being referenced, is still being used, and it's very much to the current time. And we can tell you that from first-hand experience, from being trained to become RSE trainers. We know this stuff is active, you know. It's not historical. It's not historical. It's just found its way into the current day.
You mentioned there, I'm glad you touched on that as well, because you mentioned that you're not just speaking from somebody who's on the outside looking in, but can actually see this stuff. You've actually gone in and have become like RSE trained to really understand what's coming in. Obviously, that's where this has come from, ladies and gentlemen. So, you're hearing this, obviously, it seems as though you've gone in on the inside. I don't want to say like a double agent or something like that, but to really give the truth of the matter, which is a very, very courageous thing to do. And I can speak to that from personal experience as well, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you may know is that in one of my job roles, it is based on an educational campus in Wales, and I can speak to myself. This ideology is rife. This ideology is rife within it. Not a comprehensive or primary school establishment that I'm on. But you mentioned you're something about Kinsey's scale, the Kinsey sexuality scale. What is the scale, if you don't mind me asking?
So it's basically the scale is, if you're, so there's heterosexuality, right? So there's
heteronormative or something like that, is it?
Yeah. Whatever they want to call it. So heterosexuals there. And anything away from that is part homosexual or queer or, you know. So that's the scale. The further away you come from 0.0, if you map anywhere other than 0.0, you are on this Kinsey scale. You have a sexuality.
So they've tried to make it into like a continuum there.
Yes, a continuum. They call it the Kinsey continuum, yes.
So rather than it being like as we used to think about it, I suppose, where it's like you were just completely gay or completely straight or maybe, bisexuals, whatever, that sort of go in between or whatever. Now they've made it into like, it's just this completely vapid, it's almost like a piece of graph paper almost, and you could be anywhere on this, in this complex plane, to seemingly deliberately confuse children. That's the
Yes.
thing that I think we talked about. This is designed to deliberately confuse children. So it's not like when we're talking about queer theory and stuff like that, queering the binaries, all of this stuff. I believe that mainly comes back to Michel Foucault.
Michel
if I'm not
Foucault,
mistaken.
yeah.
Yes. So, who's again one of these very how do you put it, charitably, for one of these not very good people as well, Lejo. One of these not very good people as well, to say the least.
Allegedly, he had an interest in animals as well as the sexual side of things with humans.
I believe, at least he used to take young boys into graveyards and do the horrible things to them. I think I heard that in a Jordan B. Peterson interview once, so don't quote me on that, Liz. Don't quote me on that specifically. But it's designed to deliberately confuse children. So,
well, if you just let's look at the letters. LGBTQ plus A, right? Q plus IA. Right? You're going into a school, you're teaching children about the LGBTQ platform, right? You're teaching about different sexualities. If you're speaking to 7-year-olds, those 7-year-olds already identify as asexual. Everyone in that classroom has a letter assigned to them. So already, as young as he's done, they're not going to feel sexual towards anyone. But even not feeling sexual towards anyone has already given them a letter. So they are part of the LGBTQIA.
Already labelled them as part of the cult.
So they've already drawn them in on that front anyway, So children, as far as they're concerned, you fit in one of these categories and you're part of the LGBTQ movement. It's as simple as that. They've trapped the children from the first lesson.